Hi, everyone. I wanted to give you a Fab Lab Grant update. It is a work in progress, and I wanted to update you before the holidays. So here goes. I'll try to make this as short and sweet as possible, but I'm telling you it's going to take about 10 minutes for me to explain this. So try to give me your full attention so that you can fully understand what we're trying to get into. So yesterday I received clarification from the WEDC regarding the grant that we are trying to write. I was in the process of writing it and realized there was no way for us to indicate that we were writing as a network, and I wanted to know specifically how they wanted me to do that. So what I learned was we can write as a network as long as there's one school listed as the fiscal agent. That is not new information. But what is new information is that each application is only eligible for $25,000. So we can't write for more with only one application. However, the benefit still of being a consortium or a network is that the match for the project is still 25%. And if you have more schools involved as partners, then your match would be less as an individual school. So essentially, what I learned was we need to be creative because $25,000 is not a lot of money. And some of the projects that have been shared with me that individual schools were going to write will not likely be competitive in this grant process. However, our idea will be competitive, so we just need to be creative about how we proceed. So let me just reiterate what the Fab Lab Network idea is. It is rooted in the concepts from the knowledge economy principles as well as the sharing economy principles. So if you think about Uber, essentially we're trying to do that. And we know that the knowledge economy and the sharing economy is definitely disrupting things, which is why this grant might be complicated to write. However, we have a competitive idea. So the next piece of the idea is that we can network the region's equipment and maximize its use and benefit while also having a system that will allow for preventative maintenance, replacement parts, as well as securing updated equipment over time at a shared cost rate. So the other piece of the Fab Lab network, we will establish policies and procedures and practices that will be determined by the advisory council that's created to establish the way the network operates. So after the clarification, I've adjusted the grant strategy. I still think it's beneficial for our districts to write together, and this is how we will proceed if it's okay with you, those of you who have already indicated interest, and potentially those of you who are on the fence. But this is the strategy that we will go with if this is the way you want to go. So the regional network will identify 4 schools. And the purpose of identifying 4 schools is that we are essentially, as a network, writing for $100,000. That is essentially about the amount of work I can handle, but also it will keep us competitive because there's only so much money in the pot, and I think we might be pushing it in the get-go. We will be looking for schools with a significant percentage of economically disadvantaged students, and the reason for that is because the second level of the competitive grant is economically disadvantaged and for the region as well as the school. So that is a major factor. Number 2, strategy, the fiscal agents will submit the grant applications with specific information about their school, as well as additional information about the schools in our region that are members of the network, because the schools that are listed as members of the network will be partners. Will be listed as partners. And that information that we list about the partners will be the same in all 4 of the grants. And the reason for that is because we agree as a network that we will do the 25% match at whatever we're funded. So that's how we're going to view that. The third piece of the strategy is that grants will look very similar. I have 90% of the grant written, but I need the support of the fiscal agents to get the rest of it written. And I also need the support of all of the network players to identify the pieces of equipment that the network will need. So we first need to identify what we have, and then we need to identify what we need, and we need to work together to do that. We need to work together quickly. So the last thing is that the grant match will be divided evenly between the number of schools who want to be members of the network. So we're essentially writing for $100,000. The match would be $25,000. So we would divide that $25,000 by the number of schools participating. If we are only partially funded or not funded at all, I have an answer for that in a couple of slides, so we'll talk about that in a minute. The financial commitment, here's what you need to understand. So no school's match at this point will exceed $2,000, and it could be less depending on the grants awarded to our district. And the reason I can say that is right now we have 8 to 10 districts that are willing to jump on board with the Fab Lab network. And if we write for the 25,000 or the 100,000 and our match is 25,000, we should be able to get our match down to around $2,000. The network could determine a match regardless of the amount received in an effort to fill gaps and increase options for sustainability. So if we could match for less, that would be an option, but we could also maintain that the match should be $2,000 to establish the initial piece of the Fab Lab network in order to set some policies and guidelines, etc. And that work would just be worth that much money to the district. And then the third piece of the financial commitment, people keep asking me what's going to happen in year 2 and year 3. And this is my statement. So first of all, the grant may or may not have a year 2 and year 3. There is $500,000 eligible for this entire project over 3 years. The WEDC could decide to spend it all in 1 year. They could decide to spend it all over 2 years. So the other piece is the grant, you can write for X amount of dollars, and then the first year you have to match 25%. The second year you have to match 50%. So in an effort to not go haywire with our match, the network would decide to write the grant at the level that our match for this year already contributed to. So this year we're writing for $100,000 and our match is $25,000. Next year, because we will only have a match at 50%, we may choose to write for $50,000 instead of $100,000, and then our existing $2,000 match would cover that. I know that's really a little bit complicated, but the idea is that the cost that we're paying for the match right now would be an ongoing cost so that we can maintain the sustainability of the Fab Lab network. And it is that piece, that ongoing contribution, that will make our grant more competitive because we have a sustainability feature built into the idea behind the Fab Lab network. And sustainability is one of the key components to gaining points in the competitive round. So here's the dollars and cents of things. So the goal is to network existing equipment. And in order to network the existing equipment, we need $500 per piece of equipment that is intended to be added to the network. That breaks down, we need about $200 for cameras because we need 2 cameras for each piece, one for on the piece of equipment and one for the home district to view that equipment. Then we need $150 for the software, which would be the only reoccurring cost for the software licensing is that $150. And then we need $150 for labor, training, etc. in order to get everything hooked up and hooked into the system and the software around our region so that we can utilize it. So the next piece of the dollars and cents would be the new equipment costs. And like I said, they'd be based on district requests and what is already in the existing region. 3D printers are about $1,500, and we would want every school to have access to one of those on site. However, that is up to the network, but additional equipment will be purchased and decided on from the network. And typically, those additional pieces of equipment are not cheap. You're looking at upwards of $20,000 to sometimes even $30,000 for one piece of equipment that would be on the recommended list in the MIT Fab Lab certification process. Once the equipment is networked, additional purchases will be determined by the advisory council. We will want to do preventative maintenance and materials. We'll want to buy materials in bulk, etc. All of those things will be determined by the advisory council. The other things that the advisory council will determine as a group is the usage expectations and agreements, the materials cost and procedures, will we buy them in bulk, or what if we just have a one-off product? How will we go about billing for the materials? Our students in our schools have to pay for the materials anyway. This will just be a way to streamline the system of obtaining those materials. And finally, the network may consider internships or a person to manage the network. That's something we will need to discuss as the usage of the network increases. So the next steps for you as the superintendent of the district that I'm reaching out to, I need you to commit to being a partner school on the grant applications. And in order to do this, more formally, we'll need a letter addressed to the WEDC expressing support of the grant and the regional network. And only the fiscal agents will need a board resolution, and we have till January 29th to obtain that. Those of you who are not fiscal agents, we just need a letter expressing your support, and that letter will be included in all 4 of the grant applications to signify that you are on board with the network. Then I need you to identify a champion for this project in your school. It is likely going to be the principal, or most likely the career and technical education instructor. And the reason for this is because I need to know what network your district has and is willing to contribute to the network of sharing, and potentially what equipment your district wants. And the champion for this project would likely know that better than you might. But the next steps for me, I'm going to reach out to schools that want to be a part of the network, and I'm going to reach out and ask for fiscal agents. And the reason, the people I'm going to start with are obviously those with the highest free and reduced rate. And again, the reason for that is because in level 2 of the competitive piece, fiscal need is definitely of high value. So the next piece that I will do is I will share the working document that is the bulk of the grant application. I have about 90% of it finished. The pieces that are not finished are pieces that need to be completed with information about the fiscal agents. I will be working with the champions at the fiscal agents to identify all of those things, as well as identifying equipment that's needed for the region and potential business partners that we can bring on board. The purpose for the business partners is because we do want to include those in our grant application as well. And the way that it can work for the business partners is if they have equipment that they're willing to contribute to the network that we could use in off hours, then we can network their equipment for the same $500. And the other piece is potentially they have certain types of equipment but are looking to expand their capabilities as well. And we would simply ask for the same fiscal contribution as our match. And that would also lead to a more sustainable network. And they would also have representation on the advisory council. And it could be both they want to be in on the network and they have things to contribute, or it may just be a fiscal contribution. But those of you who have those industry partners in your backyard, hearing from you is likely more persuasive than hearing from me. But I'm happy to discuss the possibilities of the network with them. So what happens? I said I would address what happens if we're not funded or only partially funded from the WEDC. So we have some options. The first option, we can operate with the amount of money that is awarded to member schools and divide the expected match evenly among all network partners. So that would take our contribution down. Otherwise, we agree that $2,000 is the cost of the membership, and we move forward with the work regardless of the grant or the level of the grant. And then 3, we don't accept the partial funding, and we do nothing, and we don't establish a Fab Lab network. So those are our options, and I think we can discuss that later. But back to my next steps, I do want you to know that I have written several grants in my career. And in 1 year, I did secure over $250,000 worth of grants for the district that I was working in. So I do have the skill, and I'm happy to work with the fiscal agents in order to share the load of the grant, because this grant is going to have to happen fast and furious after the holidays. And I am committed to getting it out the door with you and for you. So the only thing that you need to do is indicate your interest. So there is this form attached on this document. Otherwise, it is also in your email. The other items in your email are the document of the preliminary Fab Lab grant, and hopefully that does the best that I can to explain how it'll all roll out. And like I said, that document is a living, breathing document, so you could see changes on it at any given moment whenever I sit down to sort of hammer it out. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached on my cell phone for the next couple of weeks at 608-482-1226. I'll include that in the email as well, but I do hope you consider being part of the Fab Lab network. Thank you so much.